The application process can be a bit tedious, right? I don't think it's something that you should rush. Canada education institutions are top tier. You need to sit down, analyze if you have the money for tuition. Sometimes you don't get a job immediately. Sometimes you don't get a good enough job.
Many people want to migrate to Canada despite all the information out there on social media telling them not to come to Canada for one reason or another. So as you all know, I came to Canada as an international student, and coming to Canada through the student pathway is one of the most popular pathways for people to become permanent residents. So I have someone here with me today that is also here as an international student, and I think it would be very good for you to get some information from him about the whole process of becoming an international student and residing in Canada. So Siobhan, introduce yourself to the people.
Well, some people might know me already. I am Siobhan. As you mentioned, I came to Canada as an international student, and I have been living here in Canada for maybe a year now. And I mean, it's been wonderful so far. But we'll get into that. We'll talk more about that.
Most definitely. All right, so welcome, Siobhan. Thank you
Thanks.
for taking the time to talk with us today.
Definitely.
And as I mentioned before, so many people want to come to Canada to study. It is Canada's major route of immigration, of people immigrating to come here to eventually settle down. And you did it. I want to hear your perspective and your experiences with the process. So my first question to you is, what is the most important thing that someone should do when they're planning to come to Canada?
That's a very good question. The most important thing I think you should consider when you're in the process of thinking about coming to Canada is your finances and understanding your financial situation. It depending on how many persons coming, if it's you and your family members, be it a spouse or kids, the amount of money that you'll need varies. So for you alone, you might need, I think you need to show $10,000 plus your first semester tuition, right? You'll need to pay that to the school already. So right there, we're talking about maybe 16,000-17,000 Canadian dollars. So I think that's the most important thing. You need to sit down, analyze if you have the money for tuition. Do you have the money for settlement? When you come here, will you have enough money to pay for rent, buy your food, cover your fare, and all these things? Because not having enough funds, not being able to prove that you have enough funds, is oftentimes one of the reasons why people get a decline on their application. So I think that's the most important thing. Separate and apart from paying your tuition and so on, when you come here, you're going to need to have money. You might not get yeah, we know all about that. You might not get a job immediately, right? And even when you do get a job, students can't work more than 20 hours per week. So you might need to have some form of savings to supplement that. So I think that's the most important thing to consider initially.
Well, to me, it is definitely. And when you talk about tuition or funds and the proof of funds, one thing I know that people tend to do is to borrow, show money, to show to IRCC that, hey, I have this money. What are your thoughts, your perspective
about borrowing
on
money to come to Canada?
Money? Yeah.
Whoa, that's a tough one. I mean, yeah, that's definitely challenging. It all depends on how you look at it and also your plan of repaying that money. I think that's the most important part. If you borrow, then you need to repay, right? So, do you have a good plan, right? What does that plan look like? How long do you have to repay that money also? Because again, we mentioned about coming to Canada, and sometimes you don't get a job immediately. Sometimes you don't get a good enough job that you'll be able to earn enough money that you can take care of your living expenses and maybe repay a loan back home, right? If you have a good game plan, if you're in certain fields like maybe IT or just tech in general, or healthcare, if you're in those fields, then your chances of getting a good job and getting a job as soon as you come to Canada are much higher than maybe like lower end jobs, right? So if you're in those fields, then maybe you can take the risk, but otherwise it's all your call. It's your call. You have to analyze the situation and see how you can go about repaying that money. Try to figure out will you be struggling to like repay this money, or will you be able to do it comfortably? Are you also coming to Canada with a partner who might be able to work full time and support you in that sense as well? So it's your call. Honestly, I can't say it.
Well, for me, we took a loan. My husband was the one that took the loan because on paper, and that was the case because they stayed back for a while, it was that he would be the one to stay in Jamaica and repay the loan. It was fine that my study permit application was approved. But there are some people that might have the Canadian dream, and you hear of other person's experiences to say, oh, I borrowed money from a friend or a family member just as show because you don't have it. So you're saying, all right, let me borrow money from my aunt, borrow money from my parent to put in the account just to show money, not using the money, but put the money in the account just to show to IRCC that you have the money, and then when you come here, you return the money. But in truth and in fact, you don't have that money to pay the tuition.
Understand.
Like, is that something that you would encourage?
I don't want to say yes to that question. I don't want to, but Canada is very expensive. We know that, right? Yes. So if you don't have enough funds, it's going to be very, very, very difficult. I'm not going to say to you that you can't do it. I'm not going to tell you that because we don't know what the future holds or what might work out for you.
Yes.
But what we know for sure, what I know for sure, it is very expensive here. And your first few days in Canada, especially if you land at an Airbnb, you can blow through a lot of money in just days, right? So if you're going to borrow money to show, but you don't necessarily have that money, it's not yours, you don't have it, in your account, you don't have access to it. You can spend it, right? You don't have access to that money, right? It's going to be rough. It's going to be very, very, very challenging. So I don't know if I want to encourage that, but as I said before, if you have a good game plan, if you have things lined up, you know that you're going to get a job for whatever reason, or you might be in a situation where you have a job already before coming here, then you might be able to take such a risk. But otherwise, I wouldn't encourage that practice.
I wouldn't encourage it. And thanks for highlighting that. All right, so when I was looking into coming to Canada, I watched a ton load of YouTube videos.
We got the YouTuber them
all the time because you're curious. What is it that you're coming to Canada to experience? What should you look forward to? What are the documents that you need when you're thinking, okay, what will I need for that study visa application? So what are some of the documents, the major documents that basically anybody must have, mandatory documents?
The application process can be a bit tedious, right? I don't think it's something that you should rush. The moment that you decide that you want to come to Canada, you should start to think about what do you need to have in place, right? And as I mentioned, the most important thing, finances. So once you figure out that you have enough money and you'll be able to prove that, then you start looking into the documents now. So you're going to need a study plan, right? So that is the document that you'll submit to IRCC It's kind of, because you don't go to an interview in person, so that's kind of like, your interview, if I may say. You are telling the whoever is going to be looking at your documents, the officer or whoever making the decision, you are telling them pretty much everything about you in that document, right? So you need to have
statement of purpose, they call it.
Right. You need to have the statement of purpose or the study plan. Right. You need to have a police record. You need to have the finances included in that as well. So that's going to be your bank statements and what do you call it?
Any assets?
Yeah, right. Assets, pay slips, right? All those stuff. You're going to need to show the acceptance letter from the school. Did I mention that? You need the acceptance letter for sure. You need to include pictures or any of these things if you're applying for family members or if you're mentioning them. You need those as well. You're going to need to tell them why you're applying for school in Canada. Why that particular school. You need to give them a history of your life as well, which school you went to, your qualification, where you worked before, all these kind of things. You need to mention your family members. So it's a whole different, it's a whole lot of things that you need to include in that application to prove your case.
I had a very interesting experience with my application. I didn't do it by myself. So I was not a DIYer at that time,
Right.
But I know a lot of people that do it because they do the necessary research that they had to do to ensure that they have all the required documents. They had the proof of funds. If there was anything they had to explain, they explain everything. They know what they should be doing to ensure that they have a complete application.
Right.
What was your experience in applying for your study permit?
I mean, the experience was good. As I say, it took a while to gather all those documents and put them together. So again, we mentioned getting the bank statements from the bank, getting your pay slips, writing that study plan or purpose of study, why you want to study in Canada, the school that you're applying to, why you want to study at that school, why you want to study the program that you're studying, right? For me, I had to include my family as well. So you have to put information about them as well, who you live with, how long you've been living with them, all that kind of thing. So it was a good experience. My application was approved in probably 8 or 9 weeks, I think. So yeah, it was a smooth experience.
Okay, good. I know a lot of persons that had terrible or maybe nightmare stories of applying because they were not prepared.
Yeah.
So I would say preparation is key. And a question that just popped into mind. Would you recommend anybody to use like a consultant? What are some of the things, or an agent? What are the major things that they should take into consideration when they're thinking about using somebody to apply for them?
Okay, so I did my application myself, right? But to be completely transparent, I spoke to someone who is an immigration lawyer or consultant. I don't remember exactly. So initially I had the conversation with him because I was considering another route.
Okay.
So this individual suggested to me that, okay, it might be better to just go to school and so on. And I never have no problem with that. I enjoy learning. And so, it costs more for sure.
Yes.
It's way more expensive. It's probably the most expensive route, right? But
I think so, yeah.
He suggested this and it actually made sense. So we decided that, okay, we're going to go to school, right? But after I started reading about the process and as you mentioned, listening to YouTubers and listening to people who did the process by themselves, I realized that, okay, this is something that I could do. And to me, it wasn't technical.
No.
Most of it is pretty much talking about yourself. Well, not talking, but writing about yourself. So once you can sell yourself, once you can put together a good package about yourself, then you should be able to do it by yourself. But the thing is that people from time to time get rejected or get rejected for reasons that sometimes they can't tell why.
Yeah.
Right? So you apply, you get a rejection. Apply again, you might get another rejection. And to you, you're doing everything that is right, or everything that you think. You're including everything in the document. You have money for sure. The money is more than what they're asking for. You have ties. That is one of the things that you have to include in the application as well. Ties to the home country. Those two things might be the two most important things in the application. The ties to the home country, and which proves that you're going to go back.
Yes.
Right? And also having enough funds to show that you'll be able to take care of yourself while you're studying in Canada.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, once you're able to show all of that, then I think you should be fine.
I believe so too, because after the agent or agency applied for me for the study permit, I did everything else on my own. And one thing that I learned, and it was when I came here that I realized, because I didn't know about immigration processes really. I applied to the US once, and it was a work and travel program, so that was done by an agency. So I felt like the process was hard, and I didn't have the time to wrap my head around the different things that we needed to do. But when I got here, I saw the importance and heard of the different things, like persons using agents and they mess things up really badly. Simply the fact that some of the agents are not authorized or regulated to do the applications.
Yeah, there's that as well.
Yes. So it's important, if you think you don't have the time or you don't have the knowledge, you're not comfortable or confident enough to do the application on your own, and you want somebody to do it for you, check IRCC's website to ensure that whoever it is that you're going to use is regulated.
Right.
That is important, because it's illegal. Is it against the law? I know there is a legal thing to use people that are not regulated. I don't think
you can apply. You can do the physical application for somebody if you are not approved to do so. But I mean, yeah, once everything checks out, once you have all your documents, once you have your proof of funds, all these fancy things, then you should be able to do the application by yourself. But as I was mentioning, if it's a case where you've gotten denied or rejected before and you're not exactly sure why, then it might be good to use somebody who is a professional who probably would have experienced your situation or your case before and know exactly how to go about rectifying that.
Yeah, because I've heard of cases where persons were refused several times. They couldn't figure it out because in their minds, as we said before, they're doing everything right, but they might not have read the questions properly. They put the wrong information. They're not doing something well, and they're not sure what it is. They go to an immigration lawyer or an immigration consultant, and immediately they can identify what was wrong. Yeah. They rectify, they write these extensive letters of explanations and clarify everything, show proof of whatever. They get the notes, the GSM notes, and they do a really good job. And then that next application is an approval.
That's a good point that you mentioned, the notes. Like, so if you apply and you get denied, then you can request those to get the exact reason from the Canadian government exactly why your application was denied. So yeah.
Right, because refusal.
You don't get that from US. You apply for US visa and you don't get it, then
you don't know
why.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good.
All right, thank you for that. All right, so a topic, a thing, a fact that is happening now, the global economic crisis, the housing crisis that you hear that Canada has. What would be the advice that you give to somebody, given all that you know, everything that we're experiencing now in Canada? What would be that advice that you will give to somebody that wants to come to Canada now?
Take a vacation. Take a month. Come to Canada and immerse yourself in the environment. Right? So book somewhere, book a house or something, try to live, right? Do it in the winter as well. Because you're going to come to Canada in the summer and you're going to say, oh shit, this is very beautiful. I want to live here. And then when the Canadian winter hits, that's a whole different story.
True.
Right? So the seasonal depression on the place, cold and people moody sometimes and all these things, that might also be a turn off as well. So come to Canada, try to get a tangible feel of what it is like to live here. Be around the people, right? Because that's another thing as well. Canada is very diverse, which can be depending on who you are. You might like it, you might not like it. So if you can, just come, try to explore, see what it is like, and see if it's somewhere that you would want to live. You might not get a true feel because you probably don't get to be a part of the workforce and see what that is like as well. But at least it will, instead of leaving Jamaica, never coming to Canada, never traveling before, and just drop boom right in a situation like this, it might be challenging. So if you can, take a trip and come and see what it is like, and then you decide. But Canada have a ton load of opportunities. It's a beautiful country. Canada doing a lot of things well, and we know there are a lot of things that could be better as well. So it all depends. But I would say to anybody who is looking to come here, do a lot of research, read as much as possible, talk to as much people who are here as possible, and then you make that decision.
Fair, good, solid points. But I'm curious as to why. What are some of the experiences now? Specifically, how things are with inflation, things are with the housing situation.
So as we spoke about in the video that we did that is on my YouTube channel, Canada is very expensive, right? You mentioned the housing crisis when you were asking the question. We live in Vancouver, right? And it's for maybe a 1-bedroom apartment, if you want to live in an apartment, it's going to cost you maybe upwards of $2,000. Right? Maybe 1,800 up, $2,000 up, right? So, depending on what you're doing, that can easily be half of your monthly earnings. Easily. Right? Separate and apart from that, we mentioned the winter a while ago. The winter can be very harsh. And for people who are from the tropics, like you and I, we get sunshine maybe 350 days every year out of the 365. So we kind of, it's going to take you a while to maybe adjust to this, but that shouldn't be too much of a deterrent depending on what your idea of coming to Canada is. But the expense, that is probably the biggest part of it. It is very expensive. If you have kids coming, right, daycare can be expensive. We mentioned living, housing, that is very expensive. A lot of people's dream is also to own a house. That is very expensive these days in Canada as well. We see the housing market here in Vancouver. You better have $1 million and up, right? So that is another challenge. There are so many things to think about. So many things. I mean, some people like diversity again. Some people rather to be with their people. That is another situation that you might have to deal with as well. And the job market, again, there are certain jobs that are in demand. So if you're in those kind of fields, you probably won't have a problem getting a job. Otherwise, it might be very challenging because Canada is very, very, very competitive. You're in a country like Jamaica, and even Jamaica getting competitive these days as well. But I mean, you're down there, you have a master's degree, then you're probably in the 1%. You're here in Canada, you have a master's, like everybody have that.
I have PhD, I'm working in a store as an associate.
Right. So it's competitive. Right. So how do you separate yourself from the pack? How do you stand out? And that is a challenge that a lot of people have here these days, because they hear on the news all the time, oh, Canada have a lot of jobs, Canada want people, but in what sector? Right. So these are the things to consider.
Good points, solid points indeed. But I have to ask you, we want to know, as someone intending to come to Canada, what is the experience like as a student studying the school that you go to? What's your experience?
The experience has been good. Canada education institutions are top tier. The schools there are very good, very, very, very good schools. They give you the best lecturers. You're learning from the best. You're learning from people who are professionals in their field. Jamaica, I mean, because I don't want people to say, oh, but Jamaica have that as well. That is true.
Yeah.
Jamaica, that is because I went to Caribbean Maritime, and the lecturers there were top tier as well. Wonderful people, professionals, right? So it's the same here. The experience has been good. I can't complain about the school. I don't have any problem with the school that I am going to. The program is well put together. It's a wonderful program. You meet great people. The students that you're in classes with and so on, they're great people as well. People who have solid work experience, people who you can learn a thing or two from.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing about coming here as well. You get exposure. You get to meet people from different walks of life, people who have done different things in their lives, people who are doing well, and these people are accessible as well, because you mentioned people having PhD and so on, like how often you meet these kind of people in Jamaica that you can have a conversation with, you can level with, you can learn from them, right? Probably not so much depending on who you are in Jamaica or where you're from and all these kind of things. But here, these people are around you. You can network with these people, so now you can kind of learn from them and level up. So it's been a wonderful experience so far. It's just expensive.
Right. One thing that I would want to raise is I've been around a little because of my introverted self. I don't go out a lot, but recently my son, who is 5, got invited to a birthday party, his best friend, and we went and we were the only black persons there. And they want to know about you, like what do you do for work? That's one of the main things that they will ask you, and you tell them, oh, that's interesting. Why did you come to Canada? I think everybody wants to know that. And they're saying, of every country, why here?
Why Canada?
And you tell them you're coming for a better life for your child especially, and the different opportunities that are here. And you say, I came here as a student. They're like, oh, wow, what did you study? And you tell them, and you say, oh, I have a master's degree. They're saying, I just have high school education and I'm working as this and I'm working as that. And in my job, I see resumes on a daily basis with people having different qualifications, Canadians or people being in Canada for a while. And I noticed that a lot of them, they're in high-level positions in the organization. They're CEOs, they're directors, and some people only have high school certification. They might have a diploma or just a regular certificate. So it seems to me that having high-level education or postgraduate or post-secondary education is not that important to Canadians, but international students and everybody else trying to come here to study. I'm just trying to figure that out.
I think it is, but because you're new to the country, so they always ask for Canadian experience, right? I think the real reason behind this is because they want to know that somebody worked with you before, so we can work with you. I think that is hands down the main reason, right? Why they always ask for Canadian experience, even though you have solid experience from back home, right? You work in the same industry back home that you're applying for here. I think that's just hands down the reason. They want to know that people work with it before, so okay, we might be able to work with this person as well. I think that's where it is coming from. Your qualification, I think it is very, very important.
It is.
The moment you start getting some experience here, you'll realize that you need to dust off that degree or whatever it is, because it's time to use it now. I don't think they're overlooking it. I think they just, they just want to know that you've gotten settled in the country, you've worked somewhere, you know what it is like to work
In
with
a
Canadian employers
organization, yes,
and
the
customers
culture.
and so on, right? And then you can move forward.
Okay, thank
And
you.
the truth is, to some people actually come here and get jobs in their field right away.
Yeah.
And I know that for like healthcare professionals and so on, sometimes they have to do like a bridging course and so on. And Canada has been working on that to make it a bit easier for these professionals to transition into their field without
like
a lot
quickly.
right, quickly, without a lot of wait time and all these kind of things, or a lot more studying and so on. So yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you for that as well. So it has been a pleasure having you and going a little bit into what it is like studying here. What was the process of applying for the study visa, the study permit to come to Canada and to study?
Yeah, I mean, if you're back home and you want to, experience somewhere else, or you want to level up a little bit, you want to add to your education, you want to further your knowledge, you want to further your education, Canada is a good place.
Yeah.
But you just have to be mindful that it is expensive here, especially these days.
Yeah.
Right? Tuition not easy to find. So, I mean, if you have the money and you want to come, then you can come. Opportunities are still here, but it is going to be very challenging.
And one thing that people could do too is just to come study and go back home.
And go back home. I think nobody are gonna do that, especially Jamaicans. I mean that if you have the money and you want to do that, you want the Canadian education, because Canada is world renowned for its education, right? So if you want to do that, then that's fine. You can always do that. But I am certain you're going to fall. If you're coming to Canada and you're in a decent financial position, you're going to fall in love with Canada. I think the people who have the most challenge or probably don't like Canada is the people who kind of struggling financially, and that is understandable. Like anywhere in the world today, if you don't have the money to live, it's going to be very hard. It's going to be very challenging for you. But separate and apart from the expenses and all these different challenges that Canada have these days, it's a beautiful country. It's very nice.
Yeah. All right. I agree. There are some things that we can get into another time, but we would say come to Canada if you have the means and if you're willing to adjust. So thank you for stopping by, watching our video. Remember to like, share, subscribe
Subscribe for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Thanks
Right,
again,
cool.
Siobhan.
Yeah.